Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my FXmovies.20 channel? Thank you so much. Julian and Lucy had been wed for a decade. However, their union had become stagnant. Julian immersed himself in business, while Lucy sought solace in faith. One Sunday, Lucy encouraged Julian to accompany her to church, hoping to revive their bond. Julian grudgingly consented to enter a location he had not frequented in years. As the service commenced, his focus waned, and his gaze settled on a young nun positioned near the altar. Her presence was remarkable, albeit subtly. She was Sister Emma, who had lately been dispatched to the church. Their gazes briefly intersected during the address, and Julian experienced an inexplicable spark of intrigue. Following the ceremony, Lucy acquainted Julian with other church members, including Emma, whose voice was soft yet assured. She welcomed Julian with a kind smile, and he saw that her gaze lasted slightly longer than anticipated, while they conversed about trivial matters, religious gatherings, and communal initiatives. That night, he was unable to dispel the recollection of her visit, and an unfamiliar yearning awakened within him. The subsequent Sunday, Julian went to church once more, this time masquerading as support for Lucy. He was, in reality, keen to observe his heart race. When Julian promptly volunteered to help upon his arrival at the church the following day, he discovered Emma awaiting him at the entryway. Clutching a toolbox, she greeted him with fatigue, and they commenced the restoration of an old pew together. As they labored side by side, their dialogue unfolded effortlessly. Julian discussed his profession as an architect and expressed his passion for revitalizing aged constructions. Emma listened attentively, her eyes illuminating with true curiosity and transforming. Emma recounted narratives from her life prior to her vows, disclosing a passion for art and literature. Julian was astonished by her wit and comedy. He did not engage with an individual in religious life. As time elapsed, their exchanges became increasingly playful, and Julian discovered himself laughing, an emotion that had been absent from his existence for an extended period. Upon completing his tasks, Julian departed from the church feeling uplifted, although he could not disregard the burgeoning fascination he harbored for the young nun. Julian started devising justifications to frequent the church, whether by repairing another malfunctioning item or assisting with forthcoming events, ensuring that his encounters with Emma increased. Gradually, their dialogues transitioned from formal to more intimate exchanges. Julian jested with Emma over her paint-stained hands throughout their tasks. In response, she offered witty retorts, her laughter echoing through the church halls. On a particularly sunny afternoon, when they painted a fence together, exchanging anecdotes about their lives, Julian discussed his challenges in his marriage. However, he meticulously refrained from explicitly. Emma candidly discussed the difficulties of religious life, confessing that she occasionally longed for the freedom of her previous existence. Although their conversations appeared innocent, the underlying nuances of their connection became increasingly evident. Julian observed Emma's gaze fixating on him, while Emma anticipated his visits with eagerness. Her heart palpitated whenever he entered the room. They traded nuanced compliments, words imbued with dual meanings, though neither acknowledged it. This facilitated a subtle understanding between them, a precarious chemistry that obscured the boundary between friendship and something profoundly deeper. One rainy afternoon, as Julian completed repairs on a squeaky door in the church, Emma invited him to partake in tea at the rectory. Initially, their dialogue remained superficial, concentrating on the church renovation plans and Julian's architectural concepts. However, as the rain cascaded outside, the atmosphere transformed. Julian articulated the rising void in his marriage, disclosing how Lucy's deepening commitment to her beliefs rendered him a mere observer in his own household. He expressed uncertainty over her sentiments, his tone tinged with frustration and sorrow. Emma paid attention. Her heart ached for him in ways she could not fully express. Emma observed intently and narrated her difficulties with her faith. "I believed I was assured when I recited my vows," she whispered softly, gazing into her tea. "Although there are moments when I doubt whether I made the correct choice." In light of her vulnerability, taken by surprise, Julian automatically extended his palm, which briefly brushed across hers, eliciting a spark between them. For the first time, they admitted their loneliness to one another. Their mutual confessions forged an undeniable relationship, despite the burden of shame they both experienced. In the subsequent days, Julian found himself incessantly preoccupied with thoughts of Emma, her laughter, her voice, and the illumination of her eyes when she smiled, all of which dominated his mind in unprecedented ways. She implored for fortitude, yet her heart betrayed her, quickening at the mere contemplation of him. She admonished herself for the burgeoning emotions but could not withstand the allure of his presence. One afternoon, while organizing their belongings, their hands inadvertently brushed against each other. This time neither withdrew. Instantly, their eyes met, and the unarticulated connection between them hung palpably in the air. Emma quickly averted her gaze, her cheeks reddening, yet the moment persisted in both their thoughts. Despite their burgeoning feelings, they endeavored to uphold the facade of innocence. However, each interaction became imbued with unexpressed emotion. Their shared laughter bore an undercurrent of yearning, and even the simplest gestures, a smile or a glance, possessed a profundity that left them both disoriented. Temptation was no longer an abstract concept, it had entrenched itself in their hearts, and they both recognized that the boundary between friendship and a deeper connection had become increasingly indistinct, particularly during one tranquil moment. Julian remained at the chapel late into the evening to assist Emma in organizing supplies for an impending charity event. The subdued lighting and the gentle murmur of their dialogue fostered an atmosphere that felt nearly intimate. As they collaborated closely, their movements decelerated and their proximity diminished. At one moment, Emma extended her hand for a box simultaneously as Julian did, resulting in their hands meeting this time. The contact lingered, and neither made an attempt to withdraw. Julian confronted her, his demeanor both conflicted and angry. "Emma, I believe you ought to depart," she stated. Julian's voice trembled and anguish crossed his face. Yet, he acquiesced and left without uttering another word. That evening neither could sleep, their thoughts preoccupied by the forbidden connection that had begun to dismantle their meticulously crafted lives. As the weeks progressed, the tension between Julian and Emma became intolerable. They endeavored to uphold limits. Nonetheless, their relationship appeared to transcend logic. Late one evening, following a community gathering at the church, Julian found Emma seated alone in the garden, illuminated by moonlight, appearing tranquil yet profoundly distressed. Julian gently observed as he approached, turning to him with a cryptic expression. "I cannot cease my contemplation," he spoke, his voice trembling. Emma's heart rushed in her chest. "Julian, this is our assessment of the issues at hand," she stated, her voice trembling with doubt. Julian positioned himself adjacent to her, inappropriately close, their knees almost in contact. "It does not appear erroneous to me," he responded. "It appears authentic." Emma suppressed her tears filling her eyes. "I have made vows," she mumbled, her voice trembling. "I have dedicated myself to God. Yet you compel me to doubt everything." Julian extended his hand and gently stroked her face. She did not recoil. Instead, she shut her eyes and their resistance disintegrated. Julian inclined forward. Their lips met in a gentle, timid kiss, and upon separation, they were both overwhelmed by their feelings. "What actions have we undertaken?" Emma mumbled, her hand trembling on her lips. However, neither could contest that their lives had been irrevocably transformed by their initial kiss. Both Julian and Emma were engulfed in embarrassment, and in their uncertainty, they refrained from approaching one another. Julian justified his behavior, convincing himself that his marriage to Lucy was irreparably damaged, and that Emma was the sole individual who genuinely comprehended him. They endeavored to maintain distance for several days, but the more they attempted to do so, the more their desire for one another grew. Conversely, Emma found herself ensnared in an emotional tug-of-war. She prayed ardently for clarity, although her feelings for Julian intensified daily. Eventually, their paths intersected once more during a church project, when the tension between them was tangible. They collaborated in silence, their hands periodically brushed, transmitting jolts of energy between them, until Julian could no longer endure it. He stated gently that they cannot feign ignorance of this situation. Emma cast a sorrowful glance at him. "Mark, I am uncertain about the appropriate course of action," she admitted. They commenced clandestine meetings, deriving comfort from further moments and hushed dialogues. Each gaze, touch, and utterance transformed into a perilous interplay of want and self-control, intensifying their bond despite their awareness of the escalating risks. One evening, Julian proposed a visit to a remote cabin belonging to a friend, asserting it would offer them a tranquil environment to articulate their emotions. Emma hesitated but ultimately acquiesced, her heart split between trepidation and an overwhelming attraction to Mark. The cabin was compact and inviting, situated within the forest. A fire roared in the hearth, emitting a warm radiance throughout the room. Initially, their dialogue was awkward, laden with admissions of guilt and doubt. "I have never experienced such feelings for anyone," Julian acknowledged, his voice hoarse. Lucy Monk's eyes brimmed with tears. "I share her sentiments, although our actions constitute a transgression," she stated as the night progressed. The barriers they had constructed around themselves collapsed, and Julian extended his hand towards Emma, who did not withdraw. Instead of merely touching, their lips met as they yielded to their emotions once again, this time with heightened urgency, permitting their desire to engulf them. The tempest outside reflected the turmoil within as they spent the night entwined in each other's embrace. When morning arrived, they lay in silence, both aware that they had crossed an irrevocable boundary. Emma murmured, her voice trembling. Julian turned to her, gently caressing her cheek with his palm. He acknowledged this, however, he expressed his desire to continue. "You compel me to experience vitality, Emma. I have not experienced this sensation before." Over the years, Emma distanced herself, reclining in bed. "I am meant to belong to God," she mumbled, her voice a blend of sorrow and doubt. "And you belong to your wife." Julian's expression was one of bewilderment. "I am uncertain of my place amidst the burden of their acts, which loomed between them like a dense fog." Both individuals were ensnared, incapable of reconciling their emotions with their obligations. Julian returned home that day, his head in disarray, while Emma grappled with the internal battle within her emotions. As the weeks progressed, the affair between Julian and Emma evolved into a complex network of deception. Within the household, Julian attempted to maintain the facade of normalcy, yet he increasingly distanced himself from Lucy, frequently working late hours. Their conversations, conducted from across the room, were imbued with subtext, and the atmosphere was charged with unexpressed tension. Their external lives appeared to be mere illusions, but in their clandestine encounters, they discovered a profound sense of belonging that had eluded them for years. Although the affair was exhilarating, it grew progressively perilous with each passing day. One evening, following yet another late night at church, Lucy confronted Julian regarding his apparent emotional detachment. Julian dismissed her concerns, attributing them to mere work-related stress. However, Lucy's intuition suggested a deeper issue. As Lucy reflected on their marriage, she began to observe the subtle indicators of his increasing emotional detachment, including his prolonged glances at his phone and, at times, his abrupt nervousness upon her entrance into the room. Concurrently, Emma started to observe alterations. Julian's demeanor during their meetings was noticeably distant. His thoughts raced one afternoon as they shared a tranquil moment in the church. Emma, sensing something amiss, inquired about his well-being. Julian paused, burdened by the weight of his deceptions, and remained silent. However, Emma perceived the regret in his eyes, which left her breathless with a sharp pang of emotion. Julian was commencing to withdraw. Was he becoming disenchanted with their liaison? Her envy was ignited by the potential of losing him to Lucy, as she had not foreseen that their passion was rooted in possession. Lucy's suspicions peaked when she followed Julian one evening after he asserted he was working late. She trailed him from a distance as he drove to the building, her pulse hammering, and observed as he parked and entered the premises. Lucy became aware of something for the first time. Something was incorrect, and she now possessed confirmation. Later that night, upon Julian's return home, Lucy questioned him over her observations. "I know where you've been," she stated coldly, her voice unwavering yet tinged with pain. "Do not deceive me," she spoke her words with conviction. "I recognize that I have observed the way you look at her. In a similar fashion, you behave as though she is the sole individual of significance. Inform me that I am mistaken." Julian parted his lips, yet no words emerged. He recognized that the fabrications and deceit had escalated excessively. His liaison with Emma was no longer concealed, and Lucy was no longer inclined to feign ignorance. Meanwhile, Emma, unaware of the turmoil Julian was experiencing at home, sensed the constraints of their relationship tightening as the guilt, fear of exposure, and burden of their actions became intolerable. Lucy's confrontation left Julian devastated, yet he endeavored to elucidate his behavior. However, his words proved inadequate. It is not as though he implored. I did not. Lucy regarded him, her eyes brimming with deceit, suggesting that it was indeed her. Is it not, Emma? I perceived that something was amiss. Julian observed and acknowledged with a nod as you carefully glanced at her and adjusted your position. His voice was hoarse. I did not desire this outcome. Nonetheless, she is distinct. She understands me uniquely. I did not mean to develop romantic feelings for her. Lucy returned. Her complexion has become more pallid following our experiences. Do you discard it all for another individual? The sorrow in her words penetrated Giuliano deeply, although he realized too late that he had obliterated everything. In the meanwhile, Emma received a letter from the convent superior summoning her to discuss the dire situation that had ceased to be a secret, and her world was beginning to disintegrate. Emma's meeting with the stern woman, who had known her since her entrance at the convent, was lengthy and fraught with embarrassment as the woman expressed her disappointment by stating, "You have violated your vows, Sister Emma. Your acts have undermined the fundamental principles of your vocation." Emma, with her head lowered, was weeping, and I observed tears in her eyes. I express my sincere apologies. I did not plan for this to occur. I never meant to harm anyone, she exhaled forcefully. Her attitude softened slightly. You must comprehend that this situation transcends only you and Mark, it pertains to trust. You have severed ties not only with the church but also with your own personality, allowing secular desires to misguide you. Emma experienced the burden of her guilt, yet a part of her still longed for Julian and the affection she had discovered in his embrace. However, she recognized that her chosen path precluded the possibility of reconciling both. She had to decide between her faith and her love for him. She departed the ABS office that day with a shattered heart and an ambiguous future. The repercussions of Julian's affair were immediate. The ruthless news of his infidelity disseminated throughout the town, adversely affecting his professional life as clients and colleagues who once held him in esteem now regarded him with contempt. His reputation as a distinguished architect was compromised, leading many to distance themselves from him. At home, the tension with Lucy escalated to a breaking point. Upon filing for divorce, you have made your decision, she stated. You have prioritized her above us and all that we have established. Julian's world disintegrated. He found himself isolated, devoid of the support from his wife, co-workers, or the life he had previously experienced. He commenced an examination of all aspects of his existence, his marriage, his decisions, and most agonizingly, his affection for Emma. Was it genuine? Was this the existence he desired? However, despite the devastation, Julian was unable to extinguish the emotions he continued to harbor for Emma. His heart hurt for her, although he understood they could never return to what was. Emma averted her look, her face worn and weary. I acknowledge her statement. However, I have lost everything. My faith, my commitments, my purpose, all due to a moment of vulnerability. Julian reached out to her, yet she recoiled wounded. No, she said softly. We have passed an irrevocable boundary mark. We must part ways. The severity of her words devastated him. I cannot envision my life without you, he admitted, his voice trembling. Emma stood, her body shivering. You must find your way back to your life. I must find mine. She walked away, leaving Julian to confront the repercussions of his decisions alone. In the ensuing months, both Julian and Emma battled to rebuild. Julian endeavored to reconcile with his estranged wife, but the harm was irrevocable. He engaged in treatment to comprehend the failures of his marriage and his genuine aspirations in life. Although he remained burdened by the guilt stemming from his affair with Emma, she departed from the convent and relocated to another city in pursuit of a new beginning. She secured employment in a small bookstore, yet the pain of her lost love lingered. She prayed every day for forgiveness while internally questioning whether she would ever find peace. Their paths would not intersect again, but each bore the burden of their decisions. The affair had devastated their lives, yet it also provided an opportunity for introspection on their genuine aspirations and the necessary trajectories to pursue. It was a harrowing journey toward redemption that neither could entirely fulfill, but the lesson they both grasped was unequivocal. Actions bear consequences. In love, it is false, it has the potential to obliterate everything in its path. As time elapsed, Julian gradually commenced the reconstruction of his career, yet the remnants of his past remained indelible. He recovered and reconciled with Lucy, however, they did not reconcile fully. She progressed, discovering a new purpose, while Julian's heart still ached for the life they had previously enjoyed. Emma sought tranquility in her new existence, yet the yearning for Julian persisted. She lived a subdued life, managing her bookstore and attending church on Sundays, where she prayed for absolution. However, she recognized that certain errors can never be entirely expunged. They had both evolved into different individuals molded by their decisions. The love they once shared had shone brilliantly but ultimately devoured them, leaving only memories and remorse. The affair had precipitated their downfall, yet it also signified a pivotal moment in their lives, a lesson acquired at a significant cost. Multiple years subsequently, the trajectories of Julian and Emma intersected once again. They failed to recognize each other initially. Both attended a religious event in a tiny town, each leading a distinct existence. Upon finally making eye contact, neither could articulate their thoughts. They were acutely aware of the lingering anguish between them. Julian and Emma exchanged a fleeting, somber glance before parting ways. They had both progressed, although the memories of their affair, love, and heartache will eternally stay in their past, serving as a reminder that although life advances, certain wounds never fully mend.